Hey everybody, some gadget guy here with another device versus device fight for blood showdown comparison video between the Galaxy Alpha and the LG G3. So let's get the disclaimer out of the way right away. These two devices are probably not directly comparable for people trying to make purchasing decisions right now. And that's really why I wanted to do a short video looking at these two phones side by side, as I really think they stand as the polar opposites of what you can achieve at a certain price point. We get really hung up on things like screen resolution, the megapixels on the camera, the gigaflips from the processor, the milliamps of stuff in the battery, and that sort of dictates whether or not we think a device is going to be good or bad. Whereas companies like Apple can show us very clearly that you can sell an experience to a certain demographic or a certain consumer, and that they'll be perfectly happy with the device, never knowing that the internal specs aren't better or worse than a competitor's device. Moving from the G2 to the G3, I don't think LG's build quality has improved. In fact, I think in some ways it's gotten worse. I'm happy to see the removable backplate return so we can pop this back cover off, get to the battery, get to a memory card slot. That capability makes me happy. But in building out a device with bleeding edge specs, really pushing the boundaries on hardware, I really feel that they've missed some of the attention to the small details that make a device this expensive nice to use. The plastic edges running along these seams don't feel great. They feel kinda cheap. The phone has sort of an empty, hollow sounding feel to it. And this backplate isn't as resilient as LG's that we've used, like say the LG G Flex, where in the one short drop that I've had with this phone, it's now scuffed and marked and scratched all over the backplate. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you've certainly heard me complain about the unfinished and raw feeling plastic edges on the headphone jack and the micro USB port. And having used this phone for a couple months now, every single time I plug in a micro USB cable, it feels scratchy, it doesn't feel good. It's almost like owning a high-end Lexus, but where the door seals don't line up with the rest of the frame properly and you get a ton of wind noise. Do you have incredible raw horsepower, an amazing screen, a fantastic camera? Absolutely. Does the phone feel as nice? No, not really. And then we move over to the Galaxy Alpha, where we have almost exactly the opposite conversation. For people of average sized hands like me, I think we've got better ergonomics, being able to reach all around the device in a nicer and easier way. It's thinner, it's sleeker. We've got these gorgeous metal edges with these kind of reinforced corners, which are hopefully gonna be more resilient in a drop. I refuse to do drop tests on my review units. And Samsung has finally figured out their backplate. So this doesn't have that really gross Band-Aid kind of texture. It's a little smoother, it's a little more like a plasticky leather than that really kind of gross rubbery plastic feel that the Galaxy S5 has. Even running along the edges where the plastic meets the metal, there's a beveled edge running on the side. The volume rocker has these nice little cutouts so you can feel very clearly where the up and down buttons are. All of the buttons have a nice metallic clicky feel to them. And the headphone jack has a nice finished ring around the inside as the frame wraps around the headphone jack, incorporating that into the top edge. And the micro USB port just feels like a completely different experience whenever you need to recharge this phone. Putting both of these phones into the hands of many different people, they both elicit a wow response. Lately, it's been a wow response from the LG in cramming a 5.5-inch screen in a phone that is noticeably smaller than the iPhone 6 Plus. But with the Galaxy Alpha, it's a wow response in just how thin and how skinny and how small, and that this is starting to feel like a much more premium device than previous Samsungs that we've played with. A few things line up really well between these two phones. Obviously, the G3 is just a monster in battery life. There's just no comparison between these two phones. But the speaker on the G3 is kind of lame, and it's pointing in the wrong direction. I mentioned this in my Galaxy S5 comparison too. I'm tired of the nice speaker on the back of the phone pointing in the wrong direction and often covered by the pad of your hand when you're using the device. Move this speaker to the earpiece on the front of the phone. At least if you're going to put two speakers on a phone, I like this bottom firing speaker better than the rear firing speaker. And if you put it in a pocket, it's more likely that this will be firing up out of your pocket as opposed to firing into the pocket or into your thigh. And camera quality is another area where these two phones compete really well against each other. We've got an image stabilized sensor here with laser focus, but it's a smaller 1/3 inch sensor. Now, I don't know exactly how big the sensor is on the Alpha. Samsung's been quiet about sensor size, but especially in our video comparison tests while shooting UHD video, the quality of the video lines up very closely with what we've seen from the Galaxy S5, which leads me to believe that this sensor is closer to a 1/2 inch sensor. So the LG can produce smoother UHD video, but the quality of the video I actually happen to prefer from the Alpha. There's a softer depth of field. There's a more pleasant bokeh. I think Samsung does a much better job with exposure changes, with color saturation. And those advantages extend over into still photography as well. And I love that the ISO sensor on the Galaxy Alpha and the Galaxy S5 is natively a 16:9. So when you move back and forth between shooting stills and shooting video, you're not changing how your brain thinks about composition. Or for the G3, when you want to just keep it in 16:9, it goes from a 13 megapixel still to a 10 megapixel still, and it just crops off the top and bottom of each of your photos. It means while we might be cranky about the Alpha having a 12 megapixel camera, it actually stacks up really well against the G3, where if you're shooting 16:9, you're shooting sort of a more wide angle photo, that you're going from a 12 megapixel image to a 10 megapixel image. It has been one of the reasons why I've been frustrated by the commentary on the Galaxy Alpha as they compare it to other flagship phones. This is a different conversation than what we would have when we use something like the LG. They are not direct competitors, and Samsung doesn't have LG in its sights with a phone like the Galaxy Alpha. It is really, it's painfully aware how much Samsung is targeting a phone like the iPhone, whereas the G3 is taking a stab at people who might be looking at phablets. But that's also where I get really cranky about worth. And anytime I see someone throw out this argument, well, this phone's not worth it for the money. If this phone were priced for $70 and a half a ham sandwich, then I would buy it. I really despise that conversation, guys. It's the same thing that I ran into with different tablets. You'd have a tablet made out of aluminum and a tablet made out of plastic, but they have the same processor, so they're the same specs, so they should be the same price. So people like me have been kind of stuck recently. I want to be able to talk about a high-end, premier, small form factor phone. I've had precious few devices that fit those criteria. So I'm really excited to see where Samsung might be able to go with the Alpha, especially as it influences the design on the Note 4, as it influences the design on the Galaxy S5, and I really hope that LG is able to take a look at some of this work in improving the build quality on their phones. And of course, I want to hear from you folks, especially in the conversations that we've gotten into in the past with most of my audience. You guys are probably more tech savvy than the average bear. And I know most of you are probably siding on the G3, especially in terms of hardware capabilities, screen resolution, camera features like optical image stabilization. So as always, folks, thanks so much for watching my videos, subscribing to my channel, dropping me all of those incredible comments down below my videos. I love the conversations we get into. And recently, you folks have been amazing to me in sharing my videos. I'm seeing conversations on Twitter, on Google+, on Facebook, and I cannot thank you enough for bringing more people to the table, and I'm having just a blast sharing all of this tech goodness with you fine folks. Hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you all on the next review.